It's a new edition of MazzaOnMets. I'm your host, Evan Mazza here, talking all things New York Mets baseball as the second half has begun for the Mets. So over the weekend, the Mets played the Cincinnati Reds, and they have dropped their first series of the second half, losing 2 out of 3 to the Reds on David Wright weekend. We talked about the series. We'll also preview the series with the Los Angeles Angels coming up this week from Monday to Wednesday. And we'll also get into a key player that's now coming up and make his return. Actually, another player for the Mets made his big league return over the weekend. We'll talk a little bit about that when we recap the series, and we'll talk about David Wright. Obviously, this was David Wright's big weekend. He got his jersey, he got his number retired on Saturday, bobblehead on Sunday as well. But we'll talk about David Wright and my memories of David, what I see him as a player, my memories of him, and what he means to me as a Mets fan. But first, we got to begin with the series over the weekend against the Reds. The Mets are coming off their All-Star break. We're well rested. Sean Manaea got the start on Friday, and he looked good to begin. Struck out the side in the first inning, but then he ran, and the Mets got off to a hot start in the bottom of the first. Juan Soto hits a solo homer to begin his second half of the season. So we're off and running here, right? We're off to a good start. Sean Manaea, Sean Manaea strikes out the side. Juan Soto gets a home run. Then the Mets are up 1-0. Then the Mets get up 2-0 on a Jeff McNeil RBI single. But then things kind of, this is where things fell off the rails for the Mets here in this game. Manaea only goes 4 innings. 4 innings, he gives up 1 hit, 1 earned run, 6 strikeouts. His pitch count went up. The reason they took him out is because of his pitch count. Obviously, this was only his second start off the injured list. The Mets are always going to keep him limited. I'm sure the same will be for Kodai Senga tonight against the Angels. But Sean Manaea, I think his pitch count was, let's see, Sean Manaea threw 69 pitches, 42 for strikes. So his pitch count was getting up. They didn't feel like he could get the 70 to 75 range at this point. So he only went 4 innings. He gave up a run the top of the fourth. But the Mets up 2-1, the top of the fifth. It made an interesting move. They go to Alex Carrillo. Alex Carrillo to pitch. A very curious move, especially when you're only up 2-1. But again, they need a bulk guy. Manaea couldn't go past the fourth inning because of the pitch counts and just coming back off the injured list. They don't have that bulk guy right now. Obviously, they still have guys. They still have guys injured. Jose Budo would have been that bulk guy, but he's still in AAA right now, rehabbing from coming. He's coming back from his illness. So Alex Carrillo comes in and he struggles mightily. He gives up 3 home runs to the Cincinnati Reds. In the top of the fifth, he comes in. Yeah, he hits TJ Friedl. He gives up a 2-run homer to Matt McLean, makes it 3-2. Cincinnati. Top of the sixth, he gives up a home run to Austin Hayes. 4-2 Cincinnati. Gives up another home run to Tyler Stevenson. 5-2 Cincinnati. So, and then Brandon Waddell has to come in. And he has to eat up innings. L.A. De La Cruz got an RBI single. So, look, the Mets. So, look, this game, Austin Hayes walked in a run. So, again, this game, after a 2-0 lead, goes completely awry for the Mets, gets completely away from them because of pitch counts limited for Manaea and Carrillo and Waddell trying to get the bulk of the game, trying to keep pitching deep into the game, and they both struggle. Carrillo goes an inning and a third, 3 hits, 5 earned runs, 2 strikeouts, gives up 3 homers. Waddell, not great, not terrible, but not great. 3 2/3, 4 hits, 2 earned runs, 3 walks, 2 strikeouts, as the Mets continue to try to find pieces to this bullpen and guys that they can go to in these points of games. And they also try to find consistent starting pitching, guys who can go deep into games right now because Manaea is still coming back from injury. And like I said, Senga pitches tonight, so I'm sure the same might be the case for Senga tonight as he goes and he makes his second rehab start. He makes his second start off the injured list. The Mets would run as a scoring position in this game, 3 for 5. They were shut out from the third inning to the eighth, but they were able to get a late rally going. They got the bases loaded for Lindor, but he popped out. They scored a couple runs in the ninth, but Lindor popped out with the bases loaded as the tying run. So, so they were able to get a late rally in, but obviously it was too much of a hole to climb out of, being down 8-2 in the ninth. And the Mets led a game, another game where you got up early, but then it kind of slipped away from you, and that's because of certain things. Again, they need to find some pitching. You need to hopefully, for Manaea, He gets his strength back. He gets everything going back, and by his third or second, this was technically this was Manaea's. This was officially Manaea's first start off the injured list. He didn't start his first game. He came out of the bullpen against Kansas City on the Sunday before the All-Star break, pitched very effectively, pitched very well in that game. Um, Pitched pretty well here through 4 innings. It's just the pitch count got up. They kept him limited. So hopefully his next start, they can get into the 75 to 80 pitch count because and get him to at least the fifth inning, maybe even the sixth. But they need him. They need him to, look, it's the second half of the season. So you need these guys, you need everyone to start revving up here. And but like I said, I think the same might be the case today for Kodai Senga, but we'll see tonight in his start against the Angels. Then we get to Saturday. This one's the one that definitely hurt some Met fans. This was the day David Wright got his number retired. It was a very special day, very special moment to see Wright's number go up into the rafters. You want to see the Mets get a win for him. Got off to a good start, got off to a 2-0 lead through the first 2 innings. Clay Holmes was pitching. Unfortunately, he gave up three, but unfortunately, he gives up 3 runs in the third and the fourth inning. The runs were Mark Vientos, got an RBI single, who's actually, Mark Vientos has done pretty well. He's hit the ball well over the past couple of games, so that's good to see. And then Brett Beatty hit a home run. Some people made a little thing of it. Oh, Beatty was wearing number 7, and he also plays second and third base. Yeah, isn't that kind of cool? 7 for Jose Reyes, of course, but Beatty plays second and third. So people made a thing about that. But either way, it was cool to see Beatty hit his 10th home run of the season. But then Clay Holmes gives up 3 runs in the next 2 innings, but 2 of them weren't his fault. This is where the first part of why they lose this game comes into play here. Infield defense. Bad infield defense. This has been a struggle for the Mets really all season long, and that includes Francisco Lindor, who's had a decent year defensively at shortstop, but not a year you're accustomed to seeing him play at shortstop. But the rest of the infield defense has been spot. Beatty has played a solid third base. Can't go wrong with that, and like I said, Lindor still had a solid year at short. Not a great year, but still a decently solid year at shortstop. But Acuna has had his mistakes. Mauricio has had his mistakes. Beatty at second base has had his mistakes. Alonso's had his mistakes. Alvarez and Torrens have had their mistakes. So the infield defense has been a problem for the Mets all season long, really. And it hit them again when Luis Torrens, for some reason, with first and second nobody out, decides to, on a bunt, which he caught, throw to first base. Now, Pete Alonso's playing in, so he ain't there to cover the bag. So Beatty, I don't think Beatty was expecting to throw. He was playing second base. I don't think Beatty was expecting to throw, but he's behind the first base bag. Torrens throws it to him. I don't think he was expecting it. It gets by Beatty, goes down the right field line, and the run scores from second to make it 2. Jake Fraley scores from second to make it 2-1. The runner from first goes to third. He's now in scoring position. Matt McClain will then drive him in with a base hit. So that error by Luis Torrens cost the Mets 2 runs, and it's a tie game at 2. And then later on in the top of the fourth, Jake Fraley gets an RBI single, makes it 3-2 in the top of the fourth. So that was in the next inning. But yeah, a bad mistake, infield mistake. And this wasn't the first one. There was a second one that cost the Mets 2 runs necessarily. So Clay Holmes, he pitched solidly. Again, didn't go deep. He went 5 and a third, 6 hits, 5 runs, 4 earned, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts. But again, 2 of those runs really weren't his fault. So that was on Luis Torrens making an error. And actually, there was another run that was gone to him. That again was by bad defense. That again really wasn't his fault. It was Reed Garrett's fault for that matter. But Holmes goes 5 and a third. He comes out in the top of the sixth. He comes out in the top of the sixth. After he gives up a walk and a base hit to Austin Hayes and a base hit to Spencer Steer with 1 out. First and second, 1 out. Reed Garrett comes in. It's still 3-2 Cincinnati. And Reed Garrett gets a ground ball by Tyler Stevenson, which should have been an inning double play. It should have been a double play that should have kept the game 3-2. But Ronnie Mauricio at third base makes a wide throw to Beatty. Beatty's still able to catch it, but it's wide. He steps on the bag, but instead of an inning double play, it only results in the force out and a run scores. So first and third, there's your chance to get an inning. There's your chance to get the double play with 1 out, and Mauricio makes a bad throwing error that while Beatty catches it, it's wide to his right. He has to reach out and get it, and the run scores instead of it being still 3-2 Cincinnati going to the bottom of the sixth. It's now 4-2 Cincinnati. So that's three runs that the Reds scored in this game. Three of their five that the Reds scored in this game off bad Mets mistakes, off bad Mets defensive mistakes on the infield. Gotta keep hammering that. It was gotta keep mentioning that it was on the infield. The Mets outfield defense this year has actually been pretty solid. For all the crap Juan Soto has gotten for his bad right field defense, he's actually played a pretty solid right field defense this year. Nimmo has been solid at left field. I think Taylor McLean have been good at center field this year. McNeil. Excuse me, McNeil has been good at center field this year. Taylor, of course, has been great at center field as usual. It's been the infield defense. The infield defense for the Mets has not been the strong point. It's been a struggle for them all season long, and their infield defense on Saturday essentially cost them 3 runs in this game. Actually, you can say 4 because Jake Fraley then doubles in the next run, and that makes it 5-2 Cincinnati. So you could say, I'll say 3 runs, but you could say it was 4 runs. But even still, the Mets, which leads to another reason why they lost this game and dropped this series, 1 for 10 runs in scoring position. And how many times have we said this all season long? How many times have we said this all season long? They go 1 for 10 runs in scoring position. They left 11 guys on base in this game. And in the bottom of the ninth, at the end, they scored 2 runs in the first 2 innings, get shut out the rest of the way until they were able to make up a late rally in the ninth. But they didn't score runs there, but they still got shut out. So they got shut out the rest of the way, but had opportunities after opportunity after opportunity to score runs and weren't able to score runs. In the ninth inning, Lindor hits a hard line out, force out. They had the tying. They had Lindor, Soto, and Alonso as the tying runs on base. As the tying runs coming to the plate in a 3-run ball game, Lindor hits a line out, a force out, hard liner, but was caught by the Reds first baseman. Was caught, caught by Spencer Steer. He throws to second base, gets the force out, first and third with 1 out. Soto comes to the plate. He comes within inches of a game-tying 3-run homer. He eventually strikes out controversially on a check swing call. I guess I shouldn't say controversially. You could argue maybe he did swing, but it certainly was a questionable call where he struck out on the check swing, and then Pete Alonso ended up flying out. So you had your 3 big boppers with a chance to tie the game, do whatever, and neither of them came through. Soto came the closest. Lindor did hit the ball hard, just didn't go through. Soto came close with a 3-run homer, but they weren't able to come through in the end. But again, throughout the entire game, they went 1 for 10 with runners in scoring position. So they lose this game with really 2 of the big ways they've lost games this season. Of course, not hitting a run in scoring position and bad infield defense. So that's how the Mets lost the first 2 games of the series. That's how they dropped their first series of the season. So that has to make Sunday a game where, hey, you got to win, got to get a win, got to salvage the series, got to at least get a win. They fall behind. David Pearson took the mound for this game. David Pearson pitched well. He was consistent. He gave him 6 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned run, a walk, 4 strikeouts, gave up an early run in the first inning on RBI single to Elly De La Cruz yesterday, but was pretty good the rest of the way. The Mets were able to battle back in the 3rd and the 5th, fight and get some runs on the board. RBI single by Brandon Nimmo in the bottom of the 3rd to tie the game at 1, bottom of the 5th. Luisangel Acuna, how you doing? Hits a big RBI double to give the Mets a 2-1 lead. If Luisangel Acuna can give you some of that and just get hits and get on base, boy, he can be electrifying the base paths. But it was good to see Acuna get a big hit in this game. It was still 2-1 going into the top of the 8th, and Carlos Mendoza decides to bring in Edwin Diaz for a 4-out save because, hey, I got to have a win here. He unfortunately struggled. Reed Garrett walked a guy with 2 outs, so he puts in Diaz with a 4-out save in the 8th. Diaz struggled. This is certainly the worst we've seen Diaz look in a while. He was wild with his control. Hit a batter, a couple of walks. Did give up a hard luck infield single. The hit batsman actually tied the game, but he was able to. And then he was down 2-0 in the count until Luis Torrens came over to him and talked to him to kind of get him sorted out. And that's kind of what you have to do with Edwin Diaz that we've learned over the years. When he is when he is kind of loose and when he's wild with his control, you kind of have to just go talk to him. Like we've seen it with Alvarez plenty of times where Alvarez just settles him down, just goes up to him, talks to him, settles him down. Torrens was able to do that after Diaz fell down the count to Tyler Stevenson 2-0, still with the bases loaded in a tie game. So a walk gives the Reds the lead, but he goes in, talks to Diaz. He gets out of it, strikes out Tyler Stevenson, keeps the game tied. Then we get to the bottom of the eighth, still at a tie game. Bottom of the eighth, still a tie game. Juan Soto draws a walk. Now, good day for Juan Soto after striking out the day before in a big situation. He comes back the next day in a big situation. He draws a walk. Doesn't do it with his bat, but or hits the ball, but he draws a walk. Um, he gets the third on a great double by Jeff McNeil after Alonso strikes out. And then, okay, so second and third one out. Got to score here. They've had trouble scoring runs again all day in this game. I think in this game, they went 2 for 10 runs in scoring position, 2 for 10 with runs in scoring position. Torrens hit a ground ball hard that had the second baseman kind of lean to his left a bit. Matt McLean leaned to his left a bit, kind of kind of reached down, but Juan Soto had a great read on it, just dashed home immediately, had a great read, and was able to beat the throw home to score. So really, that was all Juan Soto. Torrens had a hard hit, but that was all Juan Soto getting a great read on it, getting a good lead, seeing where the ball was, seeing the play on the ground ball, and he just dashed home and scored. So a great play by Juan Soto. Good job by Torrens to make contact, but a great play by Juan Soto's base running on the Mets. Didn't add on, which you would again you want to see them add on when they score runs like this, especially late in the games, especially when Diaz was not going to pitch in the ninth because he already thrown 20 pitches. So Ryan Stanek has to come in, and with Ryan Stanek, you just don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what you're going to get out of Ryan Stanek day to day, but he was able to pitch pretty solidly. He did give up a hit, but he retired the side, got 3 outs. Mets won the game, and were able to take a game in the series. But overall, again, a little disappointing in these first 2 games. You got up 2-0. You in both the first 2 games. You didn't score the rest of the way essentially until the ninth inning on Friday night. Carrillo and Waddell didn't struggle, especially Carrillo. You got good pitching on Saturday, but we're 1 for 10 runs scoring position. Bad infield defensive mistakes, and even yesterday didn't really do a good job runs scoring position. But the pitching was able to keep you in it. You know, and especially David Peterson, who was very good. He's been the most consistent pitcher for this team all season long. They just need Minaya and Senga to get healthy and get better. Um, but overall, a series that they should have won, just like in Baltimore. So, as recently as Baltimore a few weeks ago or a week ago, again, it's like their offense right now and their struggles of runners in scoring position is like a field goal kicker missing field goals. You're leaving points on the board. You're leaving points off the board, or you get into the Reds, or you get there into the goal line and you get stopped on 4 downs. You're leaving points off the board. The Mets. So that's the Mets offense right now. They are constantly leaving points off the board, and it's giving these other teams and other opportunities to score and put your pitching in bad spots where they have to be perfect. Now, the pitching has been all perfect at all this season, or at least lately over the past 30 something games. But I still look at the offense and I go, it's you guys that really need to step up. It's you guys that really need to get going. So, speaking of the offense, we mentioned before we get to this return, there was a return on Saturday. Brooks Raley made his in-season debut, his return to the Citi Field mound to the Mets after pitching very well in the minor leagues. He pitched 1 inning on Saturday. It was very good, looked very good, very effective. I think he had 2 strikeouts in the seventh of Saturday's game. But it was good to see Brooks Raley out there and pitching well because they need Brooks Raley. They really need Brooks Raley to be that 6th, 7th lefty out of the bullpen to get them some big outs in the middle of the games or towards the 6th, 7th innings. If he's good and he's effective, and if he's good, then that adds another dimension to the Mets bullpen, something they really haven't had in a while since AJ Minter's injury. So, and with Brazivan's inconsistencies as of late, Brazivan did pitch well yesterday, and with Stanek's inconsistencies, again, they could really use someone like Brooks Raley out of that bullpen right now. So, but speaking of returns, Brooks Raley returned after the game yesterday. After yesterday's game, it was announced or it's been reported. I'm sure it'll be official later today before the Mets lineup comes out. The Mets make their rosters official. Francisco Alvarez has been called back up to the major league level. He's been called back up to the Mets, and I assume, and I guessed that immediately when I saw Luis Torrens in the lineup yesterday, because I'm like, all right, the only reason he's in the lineup for a third straight day, especially after a night game, day game, the only reason he's in the lineup for a third straight day is because they're calling up Francisco Alvarez for tomorrow, for Monday. I immediately guessed that. And then during the game, Alvarez hits his 11th home run in AAA Syracuse. So you knew he was coming up, especially after that. But just by looking at the lineup for the Mets and seeing Torrens starting, because I thought if Hayden Senger was starting yesterday, then I think Alvarez would have spent a couple more games in the minor leagues in AAA. But with Torrens in the lineup yesterday, I immediately guess Alvarez is coming back up for Monday's game, for tonight's game, which he is. After yesterday's game, Alvarez is being called back up to the big league, to the major leagues. He'll more than likely be in the lineup tonight for the Mets. I think he's in the lineup tonight for the Mets when the lineup card comes out. But overall in AAA, it's AAA, but overall pretty darn good in his last 69 plate appearances. He went 20 for 60 for 3 doubles, 11 home runs, 24 RBIs, 7 walks. He batted .333. So look, if Alvarez, I think you got to keep it simple with Francisco Alvarez. Just tell him to hit for power. Don't worry about anything else. Don't overthink it with him. Just tell him, hit the ball to left field, hit the ball to left center, hit the ball to center field, and hit home runs. Just whatever they taught you at AAA Syracuse, whatever they were doing, whatever they taught you there, whatever they were showing you at AAA Syracuse, just do that there. Just do it here. Again, I know it's AAA pitching. I know it's not the same as facing big league pitching. I understand that, but they sent him down in the minor leagues to get his swing back, to get some momentum, and to just get, like I said, just get some positivity with him back. So with him hitting 11 home runs in AAA, hopefully for the Mets, we could see that in the big leagues, just like we did a couple of years ago, because again, that part of the lineup, 6, 7, 8, 9, especially with Marte and Winker now out. Marte is still out. I thought Marte would be back by Friday, but he's still out. They said Mendoza said he's still a few days away. So we'll know, maybe he's back tonight or tomorrow. We'll see. But they need Marte back, but they could really use Alvarez's big bat in that lineup. If he's hitting for power, if Alvarez is hitting for power and he's hitting home runs like he did a few years ago, or like we know like he did a few years ago, that adds another dimension to the offense. Just like Raley, if he pitches well, adds another dimension to the Mets bullpen. But if Alvarez can come back up tonight and just start hitting and hit for power, that would be such a big plus. It adds another dimension to the Mets offense. So we'll see how Alvarez does, because they really need him to hit. And they need him to hit for power. Not just hit for power. So the Mets begin a series this week with the Angels. Pitching matchups for this series: Kodai Senga will go tonight for the Mets. He'll make his first start of the second half. I expect his outing to be kind of like Sean Manaea's, if not even more careful. So I expect at least 7. Now, unlike Manaea, Senga did start in his first game back. He started for 4 innings. Obviously, Manaea again came out of the bullpen in Kansas City. So maybe it's a little bit different, but I would still kind of expect the same thing. So I would expect at best 5 innings for Senga. Last time he went 4, I'm going to guess 5 tonight. If he goes 6, great, but I expect at least 5 for him at best. He'll be facing Tyler Anderson of the Angels tonight, 7:10 p.m. Tomorrow, 7:10, Kyle Hendricks pitches for the Angels. Frankie Montes makes a start for the Mets on Tuesday. And no starter name for the Angels as of yet. TBD. Sean Manaea. Sean Manaea is listed as a starter. Yes, he will start in his second start back on Wednesday afternoon. So we'll see how Manaea pitches in his second start back, third outing, third appearance, second start. We'll see how he does. This is a key series for the Mets. The Angels have been pesky. The Angels are 49-50. If you were telling, and I think I said this. Maybe I did. I think I mentioned that. I think I said that about the Marlins. I'll say it for the Angels. If you were to tell an Angels fan that they would be a game under 500 and where are they in the division, the AL West? Obviously, they got to be no better than third, right? They're in fourth, but only a half game behind the Rangers in third place. So they're only a half game behind the Rangers in third. If you were telling Angels fan that this would be where you would be by the All-Star break or, after the All-Star break now, I think they'd be happy. They'd be thrilled. This is an Angels team that's competing. They just beat the Phillies 2 out of 3 in Philadelphia. They just beat the Phillies 2 out of 3 in Philadelphia. They won 8-2 on Sunday. I think the Phillies won on Saturday. Yeah, Phillies won 9-5 on Saturday. I think but the Phillies had the Angels beat the Phillies on Friday, 6-5. So they just went to Philadelphia, beat the Phillies 2 out of 3. So this is a good, pesky Angels team. Mike Trout's hitting very well. He's playing very good baseball as of late. Joe Adell has blossomed into a star. Um, so look, this is a team that the Mets are going to have to play their best at play. This is a key series for the Mets. They really need to win this series after dropping 2 out of 3 to Cincinnati, because after this series, they got a West Coast road trip at San Francisco over the weekend, and then a big one at San Diego Monday through Wednesday before they come back home to play the Giants again. So, and with the Mets right now in the middle of the wild card race, there's still a half game back at the Phillies, but being that second wild card team, actually, yeah, second wild card team. I think the Phillies and Brewers are tied now for the NL Central. I'm just looking at it right now. The Phillies and Brewers are currently tied for the National League Central. If I'm correct, yes, the Brewers and Cubs are tied for the National League Central. So the Brewers and Cubs are currently tied for that wild card spot as well, obviously. But right now, essentially, the Mets have the second wild card spot, but only by a game and a half over the San Diego Padres, and only 2.5 from the Reds after the Reds just beat them 2 out of 3. But there's also the Giants. There's only who are 2.5 back from the Padres as well, and 3.5 back from the Mets as well. So big wild card, big games coming up coming up that were over the weekend for the Mets against the Reds, and now coming up this week and next week that for the wild card race. So, and this is a Met team that is currently not playing good baseball. They're 11-20 in their last 31 games. They're not playing good baseball right now. So again, you got to, and I mentioned the runners in scoring position, the infield defense, and pitching. They need to button up and start playing better baseball, especially now. You got the Angels are a good pesky team. They're coming into town. They just beat the Phillies 2 out of 3. Then you got the Giants in San Francisco. Then you got the Padres in San Diego. Then you got the Giants again at Citi Field. They're going to need to button up a bit and get back to playing good baseball. So a good start would be to beat the Angels. A good start would be to get to win this series against the Angels. That would be a good start. You need to. The Angels are pesky, but again, that's a team you need to find a way to beat. You need to find a way to win these games. So key is the key, as always. Score runs, scoring position, tighten up the infield defense, but also, of course, get good pitching. You got Senga. Montez has done well overall. Manaea will make his second start. I expect him to maybe go a little more. Like I said, maybe fifth, maybe sixth. Same thing with Senga tonight. But again, falls on the offense. Falls on the offense. It's always going to be for me for the offense. Can't go 2 for 10 runs scoring position. They won yesterday, but still 2 for 10. Can't go 1 for 10 runs scoring position like you did on Saturday. So that'll be the keys for this series. This is a big series. Mets need to win this one against the Angels after losing to the Reds, because after this, you got the Giants twice and the Padres. So a couple of news today from Jeff Passan and Will Salmon. Of course, the trade deadline's coming up. First, we'll get to Will Salmon from The Athletic. He reported that he reported on what he's been hearing with the Mets and what, obviously the trade deadline is next Thursday or Friday, and how he expects the Mets to fill these holes. Couple of notes. The Mets' focus right now is on multiple bullpen arms. I think I've said it before, they need about 1 or 2 arms in that bullpen. Even if in an injury, the Mets are only in the starters market for a playoff game starter ace. Very, very interesting right there. Tells you they're not. So that tells me they're not looking for a middle of the rotation starter. They're looking for a guy front end. And now who that person is, I don't know. But they're looking for a front end ace right now to help them out with Manaea and Senga, of course, just coming back from injuries. And Peterson's pitched great and he's been consistent, but he's at his best when he's about a 3 starter, not an ace guy. So he said the Mets are willing to trade MLB infield depth. So who would that be? Infield. Okay, you think infield depth. You think they're infield. Well, that's Ronnie Mauricio. maybe Mark Vientos and Brett Beatty, Luis Angel Acuna, of course. So that's really the depth right there. It's Beatty, it's Mauricio, it's Acuna, it's Vientos. So are you willing to trade some of these guys? We'll see. We'll see how. Again, have to remember, David Stearns did not draft these guys. He did not draft these guys. Did not develop these guys. So, and then they're open to using their starting prospects in AAA as relievers. So that's an interesting tidbit. Brandon Sproat, of course, has pitched very well as of late in AAA. Nolan McLean has been very effective in AAA. Jonah Tong, of course, well, AAA. They said AAA. So Jonah Tong, obviously, like I said before, doesn't look like he's going to be into major leagues this year. Doesn't look like they're going to call him up straight from AA. So really, it's Sproat and Nolan McLean. So they could use again. They could use as many bullpen arms as they can get right now. So and multiple bullpen arms. I've said it. They need about one or two in that bullpen. So speaking of bullpen, Jeff Passan came out with his list today of some guys that the Mets could go after. He listed the top 30 trade candidates, and the following he listed as fits for the Mets. Uh, Stephen Kwan, Emmanuel Clase, Cade Smith, Griffin Jacks, Edward Cabrera, Taj Bradley, David Bednar, Cedric Mullins, who I love, Luis Robert Jr., Ryan Helsley, Reed Demers, and Luis Severino. Luis Severino keeps getting thrown in there. I don't know if the Mets should go for. I look. I love Sevy. I love what he did last year for them. And I understand that teams and the A's and the Mets maybe are probably looking at his performance right now with the A's and saying, well, you're pitching at a ball in a barnyard box right now, so it's not really your fault. But even still, the record is what it is with him. He's not pitching well. I think he's 2-11 right now with the A's. Let me pop up his ERA. I don't think his ERA is that good. Um, he's 2-11, Severino, an ERA of 5.10, 3-11, excuse me, an ERA of 5.10. Sevy was great for the Mets last year. I thought it was awesome because I've always been a big Severino fan. It was awesome to see Luis Severino pitch well for the Mets last year and get back on track and look like his old self, like he did with the Yankees. But right now, you can talk about the ballpark, but right now he's not pitching well. I don't think the Mets need a guy that has a 5.10 ERA to help out this. And again, look what it says here from Will Salmon. The Mets are looking for a high ace. Will Salmon said that the Mets are looking for a playoff game starter ace. I love Luis Severino. I don't know if Luis Severino is a starter ace right now. So, but we'll see. But yeah, those are some of the names Jeff Passan listed as guys that the Mets could be fits for them. Cedric Mullins, I think, would be a good fit. David Bednar has certainly had an interesting journey because Bednar was a great closer a few years ago. Then he really struggled, and now he's bounced back this season. So Emmanuel Clase would be very interesting. Boy, can you imagine Emmanuel Clase and Diaz in the 8th and 9th innings? That could be a lot of fun. Actually, the Mets play the Guardians after they play the Giants in Citi Field, so they play the Guardians coming up pretty soon. Um, so he also listed Cade Smith, who's only 26 years old. That would be certainly someone that I could see the Mets going after. Young, uh, so I could see the Mets going after that. Cedric Mullins, I think, in terms of a bat, Cedric Mullins would be the one for me. Good lefty. You could bat him top of the order. You could bat him in the bottom of the order, 7-8. Got power, can run the bases. I love Cedric Mullins. I think he'd be a great fit for the Mets. He would, if you're going to get a bat, I think Cedric Mullins should be that guy. I don't think they should go after Luis Robert. I'm not a fan of his right now. He's really struggled as of late. He's really struggled over the last 2 years. Mullins may not be the guy he was a few years ago, but he's still an effective player, can still hit for power, great base running, and he can hit. So interesting notes there today for the Mets in terms of for next week. So but we'll see. Obviously, want to talk shortly about David Wright. Um, David Wright got his number retired over the weekend. Probably the last number the Mets will retire for a while. Although, keep in mind, next year will be the 40th anniversary of the '86 Mets. So maybe, just maybe, they'll retire Gary Carter's number. But that is a maybe. But I expect David Wright's number retirement to be the last number retirement we see for at least a while. Since 2021, they've retired Jerry Koosman. He was supposed to in 2020, but 2021, and then it was Jerry Koosman, Willie Mays, of course, had the honorable number, retired during No Timers Day. Keith Hernandez, Dwight Gooden, Darryl Strawberry, and now David Wright. So that's six number retirements in a 4 year span, 21, 2, 3, 4, 5. So a 5 year span, six number retirements. So I think the Mets are going to give it a minute before they retire another number. You got Jose Reyes, number 7. Ed Kranepool, of course, could be another honorable mention, number 7. Of course, Carlos Beltran, number 15. And of course, there's Gary Carter. So, but to talk about David Wright, Mike Piazza's, and I'm wearing his jersey right now, the 2006 All-Star Game jersey, one of my favorite Met jerseys I have. Um, David Wright, Mike Piazza's my favorite. Mike Piazza is my Met. Like, I grew up loving Mike Piazza. Mike Piazza is my guy. He's my Met. He's to me what Gary Carter is to my dad and my mom. But David Wright is to my brother what he is to a lot of Met fans. Mike Piazza is my favorite Met. David Wright is Mr. Met. He is the Mets. Mike Piazza, I love Mike, but he wasn't drafted by the Mets. He was drafted and developed by the Dodgers. Mike Piazza was already a star when he came to the Mets. He was already a well-established superstar when he came to the Mets. Kind of like Keith Hernandez and Gary Carter, right? But or Francisco Lindor, or Juan Soto, right? But Mike Piazza, Carlos Beltran, but David Wright was drafted, developed by the Mets, and wasn't just drafted, developed by the Mets. Grew up a Mets fan. I watched this documentary The Right Way on SNY. Terrific documentary. It was really well done by SNY. Such a good documentary for if you haven't seen it, give it a watch. It's 2 hours. It's fantastic. They document a lot about David Wright's family, talk about David Wright's childhood. Grew up in Virginia, grew up a Mets fan, going to Norfolk tie games back when the Mets AAA affiliate was in Norfolk. He would go to Norfolk tie games. He dreamed of playing in Norfolk for the Norfolk Tides. Loved the Mets, dreamed of being a Met. So he had all that stuff of being a Met, and then he becomes a Met. He gets drafted by the Mets. And not only does he get drafted, not only does he grow up a Mets fan, loves AAA Norfolk Tides, plays for them, gets drafted by the Mets, and becomes a Met. He becomes a superstar for the Mets and becomes one of the best players in all of baseball and becomes one of the best Met players of all time. And it's not, I don't want to just talk about his on the field play. His on the field play is his on the field play, but he displayed the quality of leadership and humility and goodness and you can see why he is so beloved, not just in the locker room and around the Mets, but just around New York City and around people and the people in New York and Met fans. And I've seen it for years. Obviously watched his whole career. We all did, or at least you guys, my age, or, we all watched him his whole career, and you saw, and just seeing him battle, right? Seeing him also go through the battles of the injuries, right? The spinal stenosis, the neck injuries, the hamstring in 2015, and still able to fight back and keep fighting, keep battling, and going back and playing because he loved playing for the Mets and just being a Met for as long as he was. I don't mean to use the word loyalty because I do think the word loyalty is thrown around a lot in sports, and because look, not everybody, it's free. In the era of free agency and trade, yeah, you're not going to have many players stick around for the same team for a year. And look, I'm someone who respects that because every player, I think every athlete needs to go to a place where they feel like they can have the best chance to succeed and win. That's why free agency and trade is a thing. But you do get those rare occasions nowadays of, say, a David Wright, where he's a Met where he's on this one team through and through, right? You do get those rare occasions, and there's a lot of other players I can name, but they are rare now when a guy's with one team for his whole career. And David Wright's one of those guys. And he could have left the Mets because by the time he signed his contract, the Mets were on a downswing. He had the Madoff stuff going on, obviously, with the ownership. But he signed that contract because he wanted to be here. He wanted to stick around. He wanted to see things through. And I think it was according to the Right Way documentary. I believe they said this on the documentary, that big reason why he signed was because Sandy Alderson sold him on the pitchers. Harvey, DeGrom, Syndergaard, Matz. Like, he sold them on the pitchers that were going to come up soon. So, and there's a lot of other about the documentary we can get into, but I just wanted to talk briefly about David. he signed that contract and he wanted to be there to see. And it was so cool. As great as 2006 was, it was so cool for him to finally see it in 2015. And not just for him to see it, but for him to be on the field because again, he had that hamstring injury, was out for months, and he comes back and was the fact that he comes back and not just was a part of that World Series run. And here's a great story from the Right Way documentary. He comes back in Philadelphia and he tells her because again the Mets had already turned their season around. They were playing good baseball. The Flores homer had just happened. Cespedes had been there and he'd been great. But David comes back in Philadelphia, knowing that the Mets are playing good baseball. And he goes to Terry Collins and said, "Look, man, you don't have to start me. You don't have to do. You don't have to be forced to play me because of who I am. If you feel like you got to play me in certain spots against a lefty or whatever off the bench, that's what you have to. That's what you have to feel. You have to feel." And Terry and like that, I think that speaks so much volumes to who David Wright is, a player, and who he is as a person. It's just go because you're the captain, you're the guy, you're the leader of the team. You're the face of the franchise. Yeah, Harvey had been pitching great, but the Mets are still David Wright's team. And he goes up to Terry in the middle of a division race and he goes up to Terry Collins. And he goes, dude, if you play me how you want to play me, I'm not going to tell you to start me because of who I am. And Terry Collins, out of respect, is like, dude, you're David Wright. You're starting third. But it spoke volumes to who David Wright is as a player and speaks volumes to who he is as a leader, who he was as a leader. He was Mr. Met. To use that term again, he was Mr. Met. And for a lot of Met fans, he was their Tom Seaver. He's their Tom Seaver, a franchise, right? Seaver was drafted, developed by the Mets, became a star as a Met. David Wright was the same thing, became a star as a Met, you know, from and to see everything. So for 2006 was great, but for him to be there for 2015, I thought was extreme. I thought was very special. That was very special. Um, you know, and he had a lot of big moments. Look, and he had a lot of big moments for the Mets, obviously, but I think it was, and especially during that run, there was the home run in Philadelphia, obviously, the home run against the Reds, and when they won the division, there was the big hit against the Dodgers in the division series in Game One. There was the home run, of course, of Game Three of the World Series in Citi Field. He wasn't just there for the ride or as the nostalgia thing or whatever you want to call it, but he was a actual big part of that 2015 team. He really was. So, you know, my favorite. So I think David's not just on the field performance and his plays, but his qualities speaks volumes and who he was and who he is still. I thought the ceremony on Saturday was terrific. The documentary was terrific. I wish the Mets would have won, but hey, um, but his speech I thought was very good, and I thought it was so cool and so great to see David get his moment in the sun, to get his moment on Saturday, and to get boy, it was a packed house. I went to the Doc Gooden number of time and a Darryl Strawberry number of time, and they had decent crowds, not as big as that one. I was there for Keith Hernandez's crowd. He had a pretty big crowd. I don't think it was as big as this one. They were packed to the gills for this guy. You again, and this was Keith again. I know Keith and Doc and Daryl are from the 80s, 40 years ago now. I get that. But, and David, of course, obviously would probably pack the house more because he's David Wright and you know, he's more recent. So I understand why he would pack the house more than those other three. But even still, Keith and Doc and Daryl, part of the last World Series championship team. David Wright, he mentioned in his speech, I wish I would have gotten a World Series ring. And yeah, he didn't win a World Series, unfortunately. So, he didn't win a World Series with the Mets. So, you know, and I wish he would have. We all do. Doc and Daryl and Keith did. They did win World Series. You know, so, but the packed house for him tells you over Doc and Daryl and Keith, even if he is more recent compared to Doc and Daryl and Keith who were 40 years ago, and more fans I think nowadays know Keith Hernandez more for his broadcasting SNY days than they do for his playing career. I still think it speaks volumes to how popular David Wright really was. You know, you know. So it speaks volumes. So to who he is as a player and who he was and who he is as a person. So and how much he meant to the Mets and how much he meant to the fan base. So My personal favorite, I would do a top five. I can list all the David Wright moments. The home run, the walk off base hit against Mariano, obviously is such a highlight. And David said in both the documentary and I think when he went to the broadcast booth on Saturday, he said like the moment he like his big "I'm a major leaguer now" moment was that hit against Mariano. And it's funny, he even acknowledges like, look at the grand scheme of things, it was just a regular season game, and yeah, overall it was. But his point was in the documentary and in the broadcast booth on Saturday was like, I beat the best. I beat the best, so I could beat anybody, and he did. He beat Mariano. Mariano's the greatest relief pitcher of all time, not just closer. And you can argue Mariano is the greatest pitcher of all time, period. But he beat Mariano Rivera in his second full year. David Wright. That was the second full year in the big leagues, third year overall, second full year, and he beat the best. He beat Mariano Rivera. So of course that's a big moment. But that was a moment for him where he's like, yeah, I'm a big leaguer now. I beat the best, so I can beat anybody. I'm a big leaguer now. Um, of course, there was that moment. There was this walk-off hit against Jonathan Papelbon, which I remember 2 years ago. Not as memorable as the Mariano one, but I do remember that one where he beat Papelbon. Of course, there was winning the division '06, and he had a very good division series and scored the one run in the NLCS in Game 7. Um, of course, there was the bare hand catch in 2005 in San Diego, which is an incredible play. Of course, the Game 3 World Series home run against the Royals. There was the base hit against the Dodgers in Game 1 of the division series. The home run against Philadelphia to when he returned. The home run against the Reds when the day they clinched the division. My personal favorite, David, and those are all great David Wright moments. His retirement his final game he played, which I was there for. Me and my family were all there for. It was an amazing moment, amazing day, amazing night. I'll never, it was an amazing night. But my favorite personal David Wright moment was his slide against the Nationals in 2015, and just his reaction, the emotion that came out of him. It felt like it was a couple of things. It was fighting back and battling back, coming back from the injury to be a part of this, and to just be a part of it after 9 years of missing the playoffs. Because 2006, when they won the division and they made the playoffs and they got to the NLCS and were a game short of the World Series, that was as disappointing as the ending was. You still thought that that was the beginning of more years of winning. But then '07's collapse happened, '08 collapse happened, and David talked a lot about '07 in the documentary. 2009, where they had a good first half, but then the second half, they had World Series aspirations. Second half, they struggled. Of course, that was Luis Castillo drop. 2010, kind of the same thing. And then by 2011, that '06 team, was kind of gone, right? Beltran had been traded to the Giants for Zach Wheeler. They had by 2010, 2011, they had started to rebuild that team from '06. It was a veteran heavy team aside from David Wright and Jose Reyes. It was a very veteran heavy team aside from Wright and Reyes. And some of the younger guys that they were expecting to be good, Blasquez Millers, Carlos Gomez, Mike Pelfrey, they either didn't pan out or, Victor Diaz or there's another one. I can't, again, they had a lot of potential young guys that could have been core players along with Wright and Reyes, but they either didn't work out or they traded in for guys like Johan Santana, so who they acquired in 2009. But you thought, and I think Wright and a lot of other Mets, I'm sure, thought '06 was going to be the beginning of a lot of years of championship window, but because of some of those disappointing endings, that ended up being their one only run. So it went from 9 years of missing the playoffs between playoff appearances for David Wright. And not only did you have those disappointing seasons, you had the Wilpon stuff with Bernie Madoff and money and lack of getting free agents and Wright really being the one standout in the lineup full of guys with Jordani Valdespin and all those guys, Eric Campbell, and I can go on, John Buck, I can go on, you know. So and Jose Reyes leaves in free agency after 2011. So he went through all those years, all those frustrations, right? Through those 9 years between playoff appearances, plus the injuries over the past couple of years in that season itself, 2015. So when he slid at home plate and scored in that big series in Washington, where they were still playing for the division title, and he had just come back from the injury, that slide and his reaction, it wasn't just it wasn't just David who did that. I think it was a lot of Met fans who were doing the same, I think it was a lot of Met fans who had that same reaction, right? And doing the same thing, right? And and having that same reaction that he did, you know. So that's my personal favorite David Wright moment. So congratulations to David Wright on his number retirement. And, like I said, he's Mr. Met. He is Mr. Met. He really is, especially for Met fans of the past 20 years. But he really is Mr. Met. So he deserves it. It's cool to see number 5 in the rafters up in the Citi Field rafters where, so it's really cool to see number 5 in the Citi Field rafters. So congratulations to David Wright. He's one of my favorite Mets, and he's been an incredible player, an incredible person, and just a one of the nicest good guys, one of the nicest and good guys you'll see, not just in baseball, really all around sports. So, I also could talk about his World Baseball Classic stuff, but and how great he was in the World Baseball Classic. So, but I wanted to talk about his Mets stuff. But congratulations to David Wright. Uh, so, and it was a great weekend for him. So, but that's going to be it for today for MazzaOnMets. I'll be back on Thursday for the Mets off day. We'll talk about the Angels series and we'll preview their upcoming series with the San Francisco Giants. Talk about how Kodai Senga and Sean Manaea looked in their starts off the injured list. Senga pitches tonight. Manaea is scheduled to pitch on Wednesday afternoon. So we will see you guys for Thursday at MazzaOnMets. Tomorrow, training camp for the Baltimore Ravens, as all the veterans report for training camp tomorrow, and the veterans report for training camp for the Jets. So keep on the lookout for more Mazzon Jets and Mazzon Ravens over the week. So, and into next week, because training camp is here. Training camp is officially here, really starting tomorrow as the veterans for the Ravens and Jets all come for training camp. So, but Thursday will be the next MazzaOnMets episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you guys so much for listening. I've been your host, Evan Mazza. Have yourselves a great day. Tip to the captain. Let's go Mets.